جانا ترابولسي فنانة ومصممة ومدرسة. هي المديرة الإبداعية والمشاركة في تأسيس المجلة العربية الفصلية بدايات، وهي أيضاً المديرة الفنية لدار نشر سنوبر بيروت. في عام 2014 شاركت في تأسيس سجيل، وهي مجموعة فنية مقرها بيروت ونيويورك. عرض كتابها الفني كتاب الهوامش الذي تم ترشيحه لجائزة جميل 2021 في متحف فيكتوريا وألبرت في لندن، وهو حالياً في جولة في تشيلي والأرجنتين. منذ عام 2004 تقوم جنى بتدريس استوديوهات التصميم والرسم التعبيري، كما تقدم محاضرات في التاريخ وعلم النظريات، كما شغلت منصب مديرة قسم التصميم في إزاف في مراكش. A warm welcome for Jana Traboulsi.
Hi. Oh, yes. Hello. Wow, it looks even nicer from here. Thank you, the Mashq team, for having me and us here. The Mashq team. This is the way my talk will look like. This is the way I look like when I talk. Okay, so basically what I'll talk about is one question that troubled me across my work since I graduated and until today. And I'll show you how I struggled with it in several projects and some answers that I found. This question is basically, how do I produce visuals that speak my language, that share my cultural origin, that belong to the same place from where I produce and the same context that will receive these visuals. It's basically what we're calling a visual language, right? How do we share the origins? How do our images share our origins? So we can talk about pure Arabic, but we're also a mix of so many cultures. A bit like Naima, I'm also, and many others here, the child of immigration. So I'm born here. I lived in France as a child and teenager. I then came back, studied at AUB, did a master's in London and then in Paris, and lived a bit in Peru. I learned Arabic as my first language, and I then unlearned it. Also, like Lara, I refused to talk Arabic at some point. I felt shame. I couldn't adapt in France as an Arabic speaker. And then I lived the same thing as a French speaker here. So it was painful. It's a question of identity and not just of design that I'm addressing here. And also, last, as a designer, I received an education that was mainly a mix of the European modernist tradition, but also the American postmodernist, and more recently, I think the influence of the Iranian school of design has also affected me. And in this long path and research, I also looked at other origins, Arabic designers and illustrators and artists that were part of my culture. So to show how I try to answer this question, I'll do it in 4 chapters. First, through drawing, and second, lettering, and third, through single sheet layouts like posters, and finally, through publications with a focus on one specific one, which is my favorite project, so it will be the end. So although I was trained as a designer, I started working as an illustrator in 2005, and in 2010 I did a few children's books. This one is called حلوة يا مفتقة. It's about the dish of the mfatqa, which is a typical Beiruti dish, and the book is an excuse to talk about the old Beirut. So I was looking for a voice through this illustration. The subject was helping me, looking at old images of Beirut, but also illustrations of Beirut before the war. So this is also for the same book. I enjoyed a lot the flattening of scenes and the ornamental aspect of illustrating such a book. This one is a compilation of Palestinian folk tales called Ulia Ter. And it's actually through a conversation with Professor Samir Sayegh, who is so eloquent and was able to put names on, or words on what I was trying to do through these drawings. What he told me is, or he was able to verbalize something I was trying to do, which was flattening and mixing something realistic with something that would become totally ornamental. Sometimes it was, the reference was easier. For example, the olive tree is such a clear cultural reference. Also, drawing Beirut was easier because it was clearly a reference to, you know, that ugly city that we love so much. So this is one drawing of Beirut. This was my first drawing, my first editorial drawing. So in 2005, I was invited to draw in Safir newspaper. And it was a very interesting challenge because the newspaper is a format that is dominated by facts and documentary images. And suddenly I had a place to say very personal things. So they're, personal stories using drawing. It was very subjective. And also back then I realized it was impossible for me to use a font. I felt as if a font was someone else's voice, and I could not find a place for my voice in this newspaper unless I was writing by hand. And then here I'll show a series of illustrations that I look at critically today, but where I think I was trying to say they were Arabic, although there were no words, only by using the strokes and the tools of the calligraphic pen. This was in 2016. The city of Halab was being destroyed. And by doing, I did many, so this is one of a series, by spending time doing these almost calligraphic exercises, it was almost a spiritual moment of letting out the anger, I guess. And sometimes I found a place for commissioned work to use also tools that were the tools of ink and calligraphy. This is a logo for the Lebanese pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2018. So actually, this is the design of the tote bag. So the logo is in the middle, if you can see it. So again, through using particular elements of calligraphy, I kept on wanting to affirm the belonging of these illustrations to a place. And I think sometimes it worked better than others. I think this is forced. So through this talk, I'm also doing a form of self-critique, or looking at this path as as many moments of learning. And then there's a whole series of texts that I would write and illustrate, and I'll show later what influenced my work, but I think the relation between text as image and image imbricated with text was also an exercise I did often. This one, I think, shows it more clearly. The next slides is a bit of a photo dump of influences. Some of them Bahia talked about, some of them you know. So, of course, Labad. So I had read Labad's books as a kid. He is actually a family friend. I met him, and also I was fascinated by his handwriting. And the fact that he would do books fully handwritten was very inspiring for me. He's also someone who did children's books, was a graphic designer, and did editorial and political drawings. So he had been a big influence. I love the fact that he subverted images of childhood, or what we should say to kids, or what kind of characters should appeal to kids, like this cat smoking cigarettes. And so the whole story is a cat trying to seduce a bird to eat the bird. And this is Nasser Khamir, who's a Tunisian illustrator and filmmaker, and he has an amazing book called El Roulé, The Ogress, who has inspired the previous roulé I showed before. of course, if you know this is Tinawi, I think this Hantar or the Hantar and the Habla, many have seen. I think many Arab families own these paintings. And this is also the work of my mother, who was an illustrator for Dar al-Fata with Labbad. I realized after I did the first drawing I showed you how similar it is to this one. I know it sounds strange that I didn't realize, but I did not. And I later did a kind of comics where I compared her drawings and mine, and how colorful was the Beirut she drew before the war and how dark was the one I drew later. This is also her work in 1978. Yeah, so that's it. So second chapter is on lettering. So here I have to say, or repeat maybe, that I did not speak Arabic for most years of my life. When I entered AUB, I did not speak Arabic nor English, really, and I managed. And this was both a handicap and actually a kind of advantage. A handicap for all the obvious reasons, but also an advantage because it was easier for me to right away look at letter forms as shapes and not as letters and text. I played a lot with lettering in my life before I entered graphic design. This is a few examples of lettering, some for book covers and one for musical ensemble. And I think what's interesting for me also is how much I like the quality of ink within logo design. So it's a little bit anti-corporate maybe. So it's rough, the edges are not clean. Mashah, right? It's dirtied on purpose. I'm talking about Ahl al-Hawa. And I think it's an aesthetic that, I adopted quite a lot in the rest of the work. I did a lot of lettering for political graphics and things that I used and others have used on the streets in several moments of uprising in this country. So I have to say that the designs for these, so there's many, I just showed a few. The designs were done very, very, very quickly. But the lettering I spent also hours doing, not in the purpose of refining the lettering, but more, again, as a moment of engaging with what was happening or calming or maybe, I don't know, or letting go of the anger of events happening. So this was 2015. And so is this one. It's a comment on our comment saying that there's no state, and it's an affirmation that there is a state and it has a very particular face, one that oppresses us, among other things. So these are a few examples of lettering. This is a poster for a play. Lettering only is my work here for an album cover. I will talk about Bidayat in details later. This is lettering for a dossier on Syria for the magazine Bidayat. And these are a few examples of dossier titles for Bidayat. And this is a little sneak peek. Khajak and I and Noor Zahabi, I don't know if Noor is here, I haven't met her yet, are working on a typeface that is inspired by the lettering I had been doing mainly for Bidayat and others. So these are a few examples. It's still work in progress, all typographers here. Okay, third chapter of these attempts at finding a language and a voice and an identity in the work has been through layouts, and this has been the most challenging because it's so much easier in drawings, in illustrations, and in lettering to situate the work culturally or geographically and historically, and it was more of a challenge through layouts. I think I was lucky to have worked a lot with music posters. So most of my work has been for the cultural sector or social and political. So because music goes through the same questions, translating these questions through design has helped me trying to find answer. This is for a classical Arabic music ensemble called Mayal. Here, for example, I think I cheated or used an easy way out, which is obviously a pattern as a way to confirm a place. Here, it was more interesting for me. I went back to the use of dots, which I think also maybe today have become too cliché, but I could see a link between the dots of calligraphy and the rhythm of Arabic music. This one is for another Arabic music ensemble called Asil. The logo of Asil is the work of Samir Sayer. And this is a particular lyrical genre called the Burda. It's a medieval praise to the Prophet originally, but it became a genre in music. Burda means the mantle. I think it's at the origin of the word berdeye, so it probably Farsi. So I also did research in old manuscripts to try to recreate with text this idea of the mantle. And this one is a poster for a series of performances, mainly a play and events around it, called Ya Wayl Nihaya. How relevant. And here I think, I mean, this is more recent, and here I was able to be more playful, I think, with my understanding of layout design, and how this layout design could inscribe itself in a history of this region, among others. Okay, so last chapter is more complex layouts, so in volumes, in publications mainly. I'll talk about 3 projects. 2 of them have been my main ongoing projects. One of them is the publishing house Nubar Beirut, and the other one is the magazine Bidayat. So I think these 2 projects have been, they have changed this question, these questions that I've had. They have taught me that these questions cannot be only formal. I cannot just try to make things look like they belong from somewhere. I need to belong to this place. So I only reach this because from someone who struggled with the language, I can finally read it. I can't properly, I'm slow at reading a text. But because I only worked with Arabic as text, I'm in a different position asking this question today. But what it mainly meant was working with these 2 projects for around 10 years now has forced me to have a real engagement with language, with literature, with history, with contemporary writers, with politics. And it moved my question to a formal one or an aesthetic one into a question of real commitment to a place or to a particular identity. So Snubar Beirut is a publishing house that started in 2012 and publishes in Arabic. I started as a freelance designer, and I then became the art director, and I'm now a member of the publishing house. Snubar Beirut has also opened a bookshop. If you don't know it, it's worth visiting. It's in Mono. For most of my projects, including these 2, I don't have a relation of a designer and client. So we'll have a different discussion than the one with Nesrine before me. So most of the relations are collaborations. Most people either were friends or have become friends, or, and for example, for Snubar, from a freelance position, I joined, and I have a relation with content and with editorial choices, etc. We publish a lot on, or we publish not a lot, we're small, but we publish on history. We're interested in history, a lot about the Nahda period, in linguistics, but also we have published novels, graphic novels, and translations. We recently published a book on Arabic children literature that we're very proud of. So this is a series of translation of the work of Samuel Beckett to Arabic. And here I have worked, on the art direction and also the lettering. There's a form of, it's not a logo, let's say an identity marker for the name Samuel Beckett, based on a kufi and made of detached letters. It was a decision we took to make it hard to read, or let's say as complex as the literature or the language of Beckett could be. The illustrations are also mine, and so is the identity and the logo. This was, I think, our first publication, Rasoul al-Aire. It's the new edition and compilation of a series of texts by Fouad Ahbesh, and it's based, and these texts were articles that talked about a German book from the 30s, I think, on nudism, and us publishing it today is also a form of political act about what used to be published back then, and what is now. This is an example of the inside. This is the work of an ex-student from here, Hussein Nasreddin. And I forgot, I didn't bring images, but I wanted to say that both this series and the next book we have worked in the identity on the idea of the mistake. So all the back of the Samuel series have an ink stain, each one different, so each book different, but mass-produced similarly. And all these patterns have glitches that one needs to look for. So we played in Snoobar Beirut with the idea of the original and the copy, or the unique and the mass-produced, in very subtle ways. So you could not see the glitch, and it changes, obviously, nothing. This is a book on language and linguistics called مشوار في حديقة تراثنا اللغوي. And what I wanted to say is that Snoobar Beirut has been a kind of experimental lab in relation to language and publishing. So starting with Beckett, and we have done this in a few books. We publish both in Fusha and in colloquial Lebanese language. This is not a nationalistic stance at all, but it started from questions that had to do with the tradition of theater. So what do you do if a text is written and then it's read and acted? And also specifically from the translation of Beckett, where the text of Beckett sometimes sounds like someone's inside voice, and Fusha just never made sense. So to do this, so I haven't been part of the linguistic exercise, but only the typographic one. But Snoobar Beirut has invented a few special characters. They actually exist, so their Unicode exists. I'll give an example. So one of them is the Qaf Mahmouze. You can see it's the first example on the left table. So it's the letter Qaf. Instead of the two dots, you have a Hamze. And it makes reference to the fact that in Lebanese, so in colloquial, we either say alib or qalb, depends where you come from in the country, right? We have also the haumale, which is the sound O that we don't have in writing. We only have the wa, which is u, etc. And we worked, so typographically this has been quite a challenge, but effectively we worked mostly with Nassim, Arabic, with the Titus Nahmet, and also did many back and forth for the writing of special characters. So my second ongoing project has been Bidayat, that also started in the middle of the Arab revolutions. It's one of these initiatives, there were quite a few, that saw in the pan-Arab movement that were the revolutions an echo of the similar movements that happened in the 60s and the 70s. Bidayat is a quarterly of around 200 pages. It's composed of long reads. It's distributed in most of the Arab world. Well, it used to be distributed in most of the Arab world. It's banned for most of the Arab world. All the articles exist online. You can see the website. At some point, we have printed, instead of distributing, we had a run in Egypt and one in Palestine. It talks about history, politics, literature, music, economy sometimes. The visual team includes today Khajak, Philippa, who is here. So Khajak Apelian, Philippa Dahrouj, also a student from here, and Ala Mansour, who is not here today. This is an example of a cover of one issue, an issue that had a special dossier on the Hirak, the movement of 2015. The most important thing I want to say about Bidayat is that it is a political project, not because of its content and its form. Sorry, not only because of its content, but because of its form. So it tries to be both popular and academic. It brings together old and young generations as writers and as readers. It is sometimes nostalgic, and it tries to be contemporary. It's more nostalgic than contemporary, I think, for obvious reasons. So it looks at the past and it tries to build on the present to imagine a future. And all of this has been an exercise both in its content and in its form. But more importantly, it's a political project for a very different reason, which is that it's a project that is not interested in talking back at the centers of knowledge production. I call these centers mainly Europe and the US. It doesn't want to tell them about us, because this would still mean having our voice hijacked. It talks in Arabic, yes, but also from the Arab world and to the Arab world, not only as origin, so our writers originally were mainly from here and our audience is obviously from the region, but also as topics and themes and lingo. So it looks at this region from the filters of this region. And it's struggling to do so. Actually, we find very few people who write in Arabic and who think from here. So this was an issue about Sudan. Some insight pages in the team that in the different teams that were part of Bidayat. We've had other graduates from here, Ziad Bouassi and Ayman Hassan and Lin El Hout, who are all graduates from here, were part of Bidayat. So here also Bidayat has been kind of lab for experimentation. The research included old Arabic books, including, for example, the use of dots as a way to separate chapters, so not only space the way we do today. The use of a font originally that was inspired by the beginning of printing. Now it's much more contemporary because Khajak joined in, thankfully. So it was a little bit stuck in the past, and I'm responsible for it. And also, for example, this was an exercise of representing complex theoretical ideas in a form of infographics, and to also free infographics from the sometimes dry universalist aesthetics. These are the section icons. So the lettering is mine and the visual icons are done in linocut. Okay, it's a repetition, but you can see so the dossier on Syria, the use of diagonal footnotes at some point, etc. The opening, the section have opening pages that are often done as collages. And here comes the final project I want to talk about, which has been work that I enjoyed a lot doing. So in 2017, the Cultural Center Dar al-Namr here in Beirut opened, and for its launch exhibition, it featured the collection of Rami al-Namr. It's a collection of mainly manuscripts, calligraphic tools, calligraphic exercise specimens, official documents, and books from the beginning of printing. For the launch, the curators have invited 5 artists to react to this collection, so I was one of them. And it was a year of spending time with extremely rare manuscripts. And for me, it was a series of revelations. So the first revelation was how much contemporary book design is boring and poor. Second revelation was that the tradition of book art, specifically from this region, or at least this was the one I was exposed to, they were not only magnificent, but they had functional features that were incredible and told so much about orality and the tradition of reading, etc. And the third important revelation that I want to share with you here, specifically students, was that this was missing from my design education, both as someone who studied here and who taught here. And one of the reasons why this was missing is also due to how academia is made. So a lot of the work on the history of these books, manuscripts, or the beginning of printing, belongs today, in specifically American academia, to the field of Islamic studies. And there's very few bridges that are made with us who practice in doing books. So I did a book on marginalia, on the margins. It's called كتاب الهوامش. So this is an example of the collection. It's a tafsir. The central text is accompanied by incredibly beautiful margins. This is a detail. The khat, the script is in nastalik, but it's Ottoman. It means I need to stop. This was my sign. Okay, I'm almost done. Okay. So this is a hilye, which is also a genre of Ottoman literature. It means literally ornament. This is a Bible. I'll skip these. Quran from the 19th century. So this is the first display of the Book of Margins. So what I decided to do for this project was to produce a book in mass. So I printed 1,000 copies, and it was a way to contrast with the rest of the collection that were extremely rare and unique and expensive. So these were displayed this way, and they were available for pickup. The book was shortlisted for the Jamil Prize licensed year, and this is its display at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. It then toured to Chile and is now on display among the whole exhibition in Argentina. These are some examples of the inside pages. And I'll tell quickly, I just have a few more slides, the reason behind that book. I found a Quran that had a scar, and I found this very fascinating. It's apparently a common incident in the process of doing parchment. So either when you skin the animal or in the moment of making pages. And I decided that this scar that is supposed to be a marginal element would be the center around which I will make this book. This is one. So the book is made of 3 chapters. The third chapter talks about parchment making. I collaged some illustrations from a book on war wounds and surgery, and so people, how they can stitch their own wounds on during the war, and collaged it on that page. So I learned many anecdotes or things about that history of book arts, and I will just talk about a few. For example, parchment is made, so the page of parchment is made of 2 sides, and the sides look different because one is the skin to the outside and one is the skin towards the flesh. So the one on the left where the writing doesn't show much is the part of the animal skin towards flesh. And so ink doesn't stick as much because it's greasy. I found this fascinating. I don't know what you think about it. I learned a lot about parchment making. I had a question, which was how many sheep do we need to slaughter to make a book? It could be a Quran or a Bible. And this included, I had a small team and we tried to research. I don't know the number now, but it's big. Another discovery, I'm sure it's debated, but was the reason why A4 or B4 or all the A and B standards of paper making that we use until today, they all have similar rectangular proportions. And apparently it comes from parchment making because it has the same proportions of the belly of the animals, be a veal or sheep, etc. So this is the table of contents. I just want to explain the structure of the book. The book is made of 3 chapters. Here the table only shows the first 2. Chapter 1 and chapter 2 are not consecutive in the books. They actually coexist on the pages. So everything in the black frame in the middle is chapter 1, and everything in the margins in blue, it's chapter 2. So they all talk about the marginal, and it's physically based on the idea of the margins. My idea of the marginal is both literal and metaphoric. So the first chapter talks about everything around the letter, tadwir, circling, ton'it, dotting, al-a'jam, the dots that change the letters. So jim and ha, a'jam, tashkil, which is the vowels, right? And chapter 2 is based on excerpts from a medieval guide for scribes, and it has around 12 chapters. Some, how do we cut the pen, how do you make black ink, how do you make gold ink, glue, etc. So one aspect I discovered in the history of book arts is what in English they call a catchword. In Arabic, it has many words. They're listed at the end of the page. It could be taqibe, which root is the heel, but it's called a rabit, which root is the link. Ra'as, dance. Al-sa'is, which is like from politics, siyasi, the leader. It's basically a word that is repeated. You can see it here at the bottom of the page. Originally, its main function is it's the ancestor of page numbers. So it is for the imposition and to collate pages. But I found it sometimes on the left page, which means its next page is its own verso. And I understood that this is a sign that helps in the oral recitation of the Quran originally, يعني فن التجويد, which means that it helps me not cut my breathing when I turn a page if I'm reading out loud. So because orality was such an important aspect of reading specifically religious texts. So here you can see that I use these catchwords twice. So chapter 1 and 2 are imbricated. This is in the chapter of tadwir. Arabic letters inscribed in a circle for chapter 1. And chapter 2 talks about tips for scribes. Here specifically the fact that a scribe should use a round inkwell so that ink doesn't gather in the corners. So the book is filled with these little anecdotes that I found while doing the research. This one is chapter 2, tanqid, the different number of dots to measure the different calligraphic scripts for the alif. And chapter 2 talks about the recipe for red ink, which is pomegranate juice. Around letters comes also pronunciation. So a big part of the book looks at anatomy. This is a relation between where different letters are pronounced in the mouth. But it also looks at the anatomy of letters. So like in Latin, in Arabic calligraphy and typography, we use body anatomy to talk about letter parts. So this is about the ain of the letter fa. And in blue, you can see the ancestor of what fa and qaf used to be. So before, and I think in the Maghrib it's still used, fa was one dot above and qaf was one dot below, or the opposite, something like this. This one plays on the etymology of the word fatha, opening the mouth for the open vowel, a. Sukun, the still mouth for the sukun, and also the round shape links to this little snail recipe, which is how to make glue, also that comes from the same medieval guide. And this one tries to locate body letters on body parts and make a relation between letter parts and anatomy. This is my last slide through which I want to conclude. So this is the dedication of the book to all the animals that gave their skin to books. And so in conclusion, the reason why I showed you all these projects and share these reflections was also because my initial questions got refined along the way. These questions about how visuals speak my language. And so some of the answers I found, and I'm still looking, is that research in history is a place where we can find answers. Second is that if we do so, nostalgia is a trap. And that to look through history also means to recognize the mix of influences that we have. Language is both textual and visual. There's nothing that is neutral in a visual language. They all have cultural origins. And that the main answer for me has been that my engagement to answer these questions have to do with content. I need to be able to read the books that I design. I need to be aware of the contexts from which I talk and who will receive these visuals, from literature and politics, or maybe pop culture, and this is as important as form. And in conclusion, what I learned is that we cannot decolonize, it's a buzzword today, unless we produce from here and for here. Thank you.
Thank you.